And we are off. Welcome to Common Mansplaining. What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back. Welcome to the Town Commons, where no elites are allowed and common sense will prevail. Christian, how's it going?
Good as always. Beautiful
Fantastic.
rainy day in the Carolinas.
Yeah, it is. It's kind of gloomy, kind of dreary. But the good news is we're not gloomy. We're upbeat. We're bright and bushy tailed. All right, guys. So we got a fun one today. We're going to talk about law and order. And this is actually an immensely broad topic. It's probably something we could do like, 8 or 10 videos on and still not cover, the vast majority of it. But we're going to focus today on primarily some of the recent events that have transpired and how law and order is applied to those in particular, and whether or not, those are good applications. And, we'll talk about some of the more general concepts today. But so, with that in mind, the question is our justice system under attack? Is it under fire today? How's it going, Vicky? And, does it need reform? What is the primary purpose of government? What is the purpose of justice? And is, of course, everybody's aware of Trump's mobilization of the National Guard in the District of Columbia. Is that legit? So we're going to go over a lot of those things. So I do want to start, though, by saying that the role of government, if it is anything, is to provide for the safety and to protect the freedoms of its citizenry. Like that's government.
The common defense. I think part of like defense against foreign invaders, right? But also, if we're attacked domestically at home, that common our common understanding of defense, is what we is a reasonable expectation we should have of the government.
Yeah, absolutely. And not only is it reasonable, like I just want to hammer this point home. It is the quintessential. I mean, there's basically no reason to have government if you're not going to protect your citizens. Like that is if I had to whittle government's entire purpose down to one thing, it is protect your citizens. That's it. Like the rest of the stuff is like minutia. It's like all the different ways that they can do that, or all the different ways that they can make your life easier, stuff. But it's that one thing is protect us. So with that in mind,
the life of their citizens, is important too, right? We've had other discussions. Common Mansplaining believes every human life is worth saving and 100%. Has value inherently.
Yep, life, liberty, and property. That's my motto. And so with that in mind, one of the things to note is kind of the difference between like an understanding of natural law or positive law, right? So natural law is essentially that the theory that there are all these things about the way that humans interact that we can just sort of piece together through common sense, through just understanding, like observing the way that the world works. You can kind of get it doesn't take a genius to figure out that this is a drink and that I drink it, right? And it doesn't take a genius to know that we shouldn't, assault each other all day long, right? That's just pretty basic.
I shouldn't take your stuff that's mine without giving you value for it or without your agreement that such transaction is agreeable to you. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And a lot of these basic common sense concepts, goes back to English common law, but a lot of these are, they're so deeply ingrained in our society, and especially in Western values. And that's where the concept of rights even comes from, is this just like basic understanding that we're entitled to certain things like life, liberty, and property. And that you can sculpt the entire legal system around basically just those three rights. And then the rest comes naturally. Now, that's opposed to like the alternate theory is that law is a positive social construct and that it doesn't really exist in the abstract, but that individual societies might sculpt laws to best meet their needs. Now, I float closer to the first one. And the reason for that is if you look at all the societies across time, there are so many coincidental similarities, right? Like virtually every society was pretty much against murder. Like pretty much virtually every society is.
Well, right. When you talk societies, right? When you're Bedouins or you're a hermit living out set whatever he wants. But when we come together to live in cities, when we
Right.
become an urban population, we have to have, right, the 10 Commandments. We have to have, all right, this is not going to work
Right.
if we kill people, steal people, yeah.
Right. And these are like basic, like understandable contracts that we automatically kind of have innately in our, like again, it just doesn't take a genius to come up with something. Like torturing babies is basically wrong, no matter where you are, no matter what time frame, no matter, yes, you can go back and find a random civilization that tossed them in a fire pit to bring the rains, but that's just such a rare circumstance, right? And if
And
you
they're
look at all
gone
the
because of it, right? They don't
right,
exist anymore. If you want,
right,
right?
right, and so right, like Christian will tell you, right, like as societies are, as you check each culture, right, some will thrive and some will not. Far and away, the ones that thrive have these exact same rules, these exact same basic understanding of rights and how we respect each other. So, with that in mind,
Let me make a common
yeah,
mansplaining.
yeah, hit it.
Let me mansplain. Ideally, you'd like civilization, right? This is the world to be advancing, right? That we're learning, we're progressing. This is the ethos of the progressive movement that we need to progress and do better, right? And but we're also can't forget the baseline. If we're progressing, if we're achieving higher things in art and creativity and achievement
Right,
and expanding rights and things in other ways, we can't forget. Now the Romans would not have accepted the level of violence that was going on in DC.
right,
Roving bands of gangs, homeless, 11 homeless encampments, things that were going on. And so for me, um, it's not so much that Trump is doing this shock, and we'll see how long it happens, but that
right,
it hasn't been done before.
right,
It feels like maybe every 10 years they should do one of these sort of shocks, bringing out the National Guard and we wait because DC it's special, it's different. It's not a state,
it is.
right? It has a large
Yeah,
population. It has been most of the people there tend to vote heavily Democratic.
of
We
course.
did give them the chance to have their own mayors and things like that, but the Constitution and the laws are all there that the federal government's rights can preempt those if they wish, right?
Right,
And so a lot is based on custom and sort of what is polite. Well, to not step on DC's toes or things like that. While certain things are statute, if you want to call out the National Guard in a state, you go to the governor, so like that.
right,
And in rare instances, can you override that? In DC, they report right to the president, right? I
right
mean,
to the big dog.
and they can do that. So I don't. I think there's people are getting a little overly dramatic about this. People that oppose it.
Mhm.
Again, we'll see how long it goes on. There have been several in recent memory times where security has clamped down in DC, where they've erected fences, and closed off the Capitol or closed off the White House temporarily because of something going on, and then
Mhm.
those have come down.
Okay.
But in general, bringing security to the population, to the rest of the city, I don't think is a bad thing. I mean, we've seen them exercise that ability to secure the federal buildings.
Right.
Let's secure. Let's give a more uh, climate of security, and I think we're talking about part of creating a climate is not only enforcement but also the show of enforcement.
Right.
Having again resetting expectations in people's mind. If they commit crimes, they're going to be investigated,
Yeah.
right? That's something that right now or the DC was not doing. Resources put, and if they're caught, that they will face consequences that are so bad, it will make them reconsider committing said crime in the future.
Right. So
Those are the common sense sort of policing activities that DC was failing to do.
yeah, and so I mentioned to you earlier, I'm a little bit split on this whole
Yeah,
thing, right? So
yeah,
I do agree that DC was dropping the ball in many regards, right? Um I I want to just state up front for everybody, because I'm a very principled person, right? And I agree with. I want to. Like to think that I am constant in that, and consistent in my principles, and that I don't sacrifice them just every time the wind blows. I'm against National Guard action in general. Now, there's of course exceptions to that, right? Of course, National Guard is valid for home common defense when it's like a rebellion, or when it's when there's, I
A
think,
disaster.
like when there was active defiance against federal agency, like in LA, I was more in the camp of using it in that situation, because you had federal agents out there and people were like actually attacking the federal agents for being federal agents, right? So it was like direct controversion of the federal government. Now in this case, it's more like just to shore up neglect, which is principally not something I'm as thrilled about as like fighting against active rebellion. Now, I just want to get the rest of this out real quick. Now that being said,
Sorry, I was
that
just
isn't,
sneezing. Yeah.
oh, sure.
Yeah.
That being said, that isn't to say that I can't concede that there may be a good outcome here. There might, right? And it's obvious from from studies and stuff that they're the heavier the police presence, obviously, the more crime goes down. That's just basic, right? But that being said, I just can't help but ask, isn't there an intermediate step, right? Let me just give you a quick analogy, right?
Right.
So like I was a manager. For most of you guys do or don't know, I was a manager all my life. I managed convenience stores, and I managed in the military, and I managed, pawn shops. And I take over new places all the time, new districts, new stores or whatever. And always there's going to be a situation where someone's doing something they're not supposed to be doing, right? They're slacking, like DC is slacking right now. Now,
Yeah.
yeah, could I fire them? Maybe in the beginning of my career, before HR rules got crazy, maybe I could. But almost always there was another step in between, right? Almost always there was a step where I'd say, listen, you're slacking and I need you to get on the program, or I'm going to have to take over and do it my way, probably with somebody else, right? And I just can't help but think that Trump could have just, said, look, obviously the crime here in DC is getting out of control, right? Like, even though, violent crime is down overall across the world over the last 30 years, largely because of leaded gasoline going away, I think, but there's a lot of other weird correlation. But like, even though that's the case, right? Couldn't he have just said, hey, listen, I'm going to give you a week to get this nonsense under control. Like, I'm going to give you a week to move all this homeless, all these people like in tents and giants, like on everybody else's public property doorsteps out. I'm going to give you a week to get this squared away. If you can get it done, great. And if not, we'll do it my way. Because then it'll be a clear because I feel like for something like this, you need, just like in my job, you need documentation. You need clear documentation showing that they had the opportunity and then deliberately or willfully failed, right? Then you can say, all right, you are obviously not trying to do this, so I'm going to move in. What are your
I
thoughts on
think
that?
I think some of that, but I think it's the inverse. Partly, all right, I'm not as concerned about the National Guard in this case because DC is not state, but also because the number of National Guard is not significant. It's only 500, I believe,
Yeah,
right?
okay.
And this is just a show. It's just a gesture to show, look, I'm in control. I'm taking charge. And it's sort of like, look, I'm going to train you for 30 days. He's got a 30-day window, right? These are just laws on the books, laws that weren't being passed. He didn't have to do any. He didn't have to sign an executive order or do anything, right, or break any laws. He's like, I'm going to take over for 30 days, and I'm going to set the expectation for you how I want this to be handled. Because it's very clearly that the mayor, Bowser, I believe is how you pronounce her name,
Yeah, something like that.
is working. She's having meetings with Pam Bondi. She's having meetings. They're involving her. They're
Yeah.
letting her know, right? And after Trump initially said he was going to do this, that the violence was out of control, the initial sort of boilerplate response, there is a representative in the House of Representatives, doesn't vote, but
Right.
put out a thing sort of boilerplate opposing it.
Yeah.
Since that time, since the stuff has gone into place, she has said nothing. She's been quiet. because their constituents actually even have been saying, hey, well, let's see if this makes things better. Let's give them a chance, right? They are right now, if they were just blocking out the mayor or anything like that, I can see this, but I think they're like, we need to set an expectation. We're going to train you. It's sort of like if you were a district manager or something, you found a struggling store, you came in, you didn't fire the manager, but you're like, but for 30 days, I'm going to give you training about how I expect this store to be run.
Okay.
Right. And part of it is I'm going to have, some of my guys from corporate walking around here and as a big show, maybe they don't do a whole lot. They stand around, but you feel like, there is what's called the Hawthorne effect. When people feel like they're being watched, they act differently. Right. And so bringing in the National Guard, doing it, show is part of it. Politics and part of the things, even if the National Guard, right, their thing is don't engage people, just walk and be friendly as you walk some of these trails where people run and that have become dangerous, or some of these dangerous spots. They're not doing any real law enforcement, but it just sends a message that Trump is in charge right now, temporarily. That's not authoritarianism. That's not, this is all within his legal right to do. Now, if after 30 days, right, and he continues to do this without justifying why he's doing it, without going to Congress to get authorizations, then I can see complaints of a power grab or stepping on toes. If the things that he's asking DC to do, they're belligerent and refuse to do. Right now, Bowser said, like, while she opposes, the lack of home rule, she has been involved and the things that they're asking for really, are not crazy asks. And it's one of those things. All right, I sent you a video. His account on X called Common Sense.
Yeah,
he's an African American, a U.S. citizen living in D.C. Who said he appreciated this. He didn't feel like this was, even though D.C. is a majority Black population, and the crime that triggered all of this was perpetuated by Black youths. He didn't feel like it was a racial thing. They were clearing out homeless encampments where people of all nationalities were in them. And he felt like another observation he said, getting anything done in the district from the government used to just be the worst. It's like if you wanted to get a gun, it would take you 5 months to get a gun. Permanent, right? The appointments, he's like, now they turn that around in a couple of weeks. It's like when Trump starts firing people, he's like, all of a sudden people puts a fire on people's butts and they start doing their job. And that's all he really wants the DC system to do, police and everything, to do their job. There's too many stories of them not doing their jobs. There's too many stories of people saying there was a crime, they called the police were 2 blocks away, didn't show up for 30 minutes, or they called them, they didn't show up at all, right? They become too lax in different stuff, saying that, oh, well, they say, it's too hard for them to solve these crimes, so they're not even putting in an effort. That creates a climate where thieves feel like, hey, I can do something and I won't get caught. It's sort of a difficult to quantify sort of mental state, where you have to have a thing that there's an expectation that crimes are going to be investigated, right? That if you do something, you will get caught. It's definitely an expectation I feel here in North Carolina, in Raleigh, right? Of course. We're in a state capital. There's lots of police around. Well, they take it seriously, and so DC should have a similar kind of feel. So if law enforcement, if the Department of Justice comes in and does a training, this is what we need you to do. If you don't do this, this is the way that we expect you to do it, then there will be repercussions. We will go to Congress and ask you. But right now, I'm giving them a 30-day training period, shall we say.
Sure. But again, I think that's like, I still feel like there's a step that they missed, right? And it's not that training isn't a good thing, right? Of course, in a perfect world, the training goes, before any kind of coaching or corrective procedures, right? And this would normally fit that, except for, in the government, we have very specific rules where, it's kind of taboo for the National Guard to get involved. So it's like, in this particular case, because the National Guard doesn't normally get involved, right? Like that's a key difference in my analogy
Yeah.
that fails is that,
You
in a
think
manager's,
he's too cavalier? He's too cavalier with the National
well,
Guard.
he's just so
If he
quick.
hadn't called in the National Guard, you think it'd be appropriate. Him calling in the National Guard tipped it to you over the line.
Well, it's not that it's tipped over the line. It's just that, okay, I mean, obviously we have this law for a reason, right? And this is one thing where I'll push back against those who call him authoritarian immediately. Like,
Yeah.
we have these laws for a reason. If he's operating within the boundaries of the law, then either the law is authoritarian, which we put it into place a long time ago. It has nothing to do with Trump, or
Yeah.
like he's not violating the law. So right. Obviously, this is legal. Now the question isn't whether or not it's legal. The question is whether or not it's proper. Right? Is there something
Yeah.
else?
Well, yeah,
Is there
custom.
something else
Most
that could be
presidents.
done?
Yeah.
And that's my only question is: there something else? Is there an intermediate step that could have been taken? And my thing
All
is,
right.
Trump is never worried ever about those intermediate steps. He always jumps immediately to the very most pro. And don't get me wrong, because from a business mindset, sometimes that's a great quality, but
All right.
just sometimes you want to tread a little bit softer. And Trump's just bam.
I can get with that. I can see that. I think he would anticipate, right, because the mayor or right, the elected offices, the home rule is all staunchly Democratic, right,
Yeah.
and have come out and been very negative towards Trump in the past, publicly, politically, that he wasn't expecting a lot of cooperation there. Now, Pam Bowser so far has seemed to be willing to cooperate with him. I mean, this is their job.
Right.
But but yeah, so maybe he could have called them in and say, look, you need a new police commissioner, or you need to do some stuff about these things. This is unacceptable. People shouldn't come to DC and feel scared about walking the streets. This should be a symbol of America. It should be the safest place ever. Do better. And then, give her a month to see that if something happens. Now, other presidents haven't done this because generally they weren't interested they know they're not going to win any votes.
Yeah, right.
One electoral vote or 3 electoral votes or whatever in DC. So they've been uninterested in governing DC, right? They want to do foreign policy, or they want to get middle-class jobs, and DC is not really a political win. So they've been unwilling to expend political capital or waste their time on making DC great.
Right.
So this is Trump. He sees a problem. He sees inefficiency. He sees people slacking. And he's like, why isn't anybody doing anything about this? He's a disruptive president. So just because the custom has been set for the last 50 years to kind of grouse and complain, but, let DC elected officials handle it, he's like, no, we're going to send a message, and this will get through a lot clearer than that. And that they'll see what it's like if we're in control.
Right.
And they will so badly not want us to be in control, they'll get their act together so we don't have to be in control.
Well, that's
right?
often the case.
That's a little bit like when you come down on a failing store, right? To use your analogy, you come down and say, we're going to do everything by the book, and you're not going to, but I'm going to make this unpleasant. You're going to never want me to come back here and have to do this to you again, right? You're going to do everything by the book, so I don't have to do this. So he sees their political enemies and their elites.
Right.
That's why he reserves his sort of, I think, his feistiness too, or his bull in a china shop kind of disruptor.
Sure, and I mean, obviously, I mean, he's the top dog, and he does have the statutory right here, and so there is all that. I just feel like every now and then, I mean, for somebody who already has that authoritarian word thrown at him all the time, you would think that just every now and then he would surprise us and just be slightly less authoritarian. Now, I wanted to address something that Joshua said. He said that Yeah, he wanted to know what was wrong with helping out the homeless. I don't think there's anything wrong with helping
Yeah.
out the homeless. I think honestly, I think that's what Trump is claiming to be trying to do here, right? Like
They're offering to
ultimately,
put them in homeless shelters. They have
right,
homeless
right.
shelters.
Right. I mean, ultimately, it's funny. It's funny that I talked to a friend the other day, and he's like, "Oh no, they're going to put them in concentration camps," and I'm like, "What are they in now?" Because they're in giant grouped tented areas. Like, what exactly are we worried about, right? Because I mean, it's not like the places that they're going to go. It can't be worse than where they are right now. I mean, the only difference, of course, is that it's further away from the city if they work there or
They can
beg
have a
there or whatever.
designated latrine instead of just going wherever they want to.
Yeah. Now that that
Right?
that being said, I mean, like, have we got? This kind of brings up broader questions in America. Like, have we gotten to the point where we're no longer free enough in public property to do what we want, or something like that? But I mean, I think that zoning laws exist for a reason. I mean, I think that there is a level of organization that is necessary, especially in a densely populated area like that. Or you get trash everywhere. You get tents
Yeah.
everywhere. You get loitering everywhere. You get it gets to a point where there is a critical mass that's breached. And
Well, public parks are public good, especially in a densely populated area. People don't have backyards; they need to be able to go
right,
to it. And if it's unsafe or over, now, yeah. So the thing was to say, all right, if you're truly homeless, you can go to this homeless shelter. If
right, right.
you don't want to go to the homeless shelter, you can leave and
Yeah,
find another place that's not here, right? If
you
you
don't have to
refuse
go
both of
home,
those options, you'll be
but you can't
arrested
take.
and you'll
Right,
go to jail. So
right.
they are giving them those other options. Now, part of it is a lot of these people, like, they just noticed that DC wasn't enforcing it.
Yeah,
And when you
that's fair.
notice, they're like, hey, they're not doing anything about it. So it's like at the beach, if you find a spot that says no parking, $250 fine or something, but word gets out that nobody comes and checks, it's
Right.
a free parking spot.
Now,
Everybody's going to park there, right? And exploit it like crazy.
I feel like that's where you can still coach first, though. You can
Okay.
still just say something first, just like just throw it out there. Be like, hey, look, I just noticed you're not doing anything about this. Let's do something about it. And then you've got that, because that's what I would have to toward the end of my career as a manager. That's what I would have to do. I would have to document, or else I couldn't even take that next step, or else like HR would be all over me. They'd be like, "Oh, did you give him a warning? Did you write him up? Did you da 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 da?" And if I don't do any like 11 of the documentational steps, then I can't take that next step and say, "All right, look, I'm going to do it for you." And I'm going to show you how you need it. Because, I mean, obviously, in a perfect world, management, you lead by example anyway. You show you the very first time they come in, you train them and you say, hey, this is how I'd like it to be done. Obviously, this is not exactly the same because he didn't get the opportunity, but and maybe he's taking an opportunity where maybe everybody else was just
I,
wrong
I,
not to.
I think, Trump lived most of his life in New York City in the 70s and 80s when obviously there was a lot of crime. So obviously it's not people are saying like, oh, there's acceptable a certain level of crime in cities. It's not that Trump doesn't understand that. He understands that, he lived by it. But the enforcement, right, or whatever, he felt like the city government was not acting appropriately.
Right.
And
They were
whether
getting
it's an
stuff done.
overreaction or not, we'll see. We'll see if they can get their act together. It looks like Mayor Bowser is doing everything she can
Yeah.
so the 30 days Trump can draw down everything and home rule can resume.
And
But
sometimes if
just
you just
trying to enforce the rules is not authoritarian. Now it is belligerent and it's right,
yeah, I mean, of
but
course,
we'll see.
anytime Trump feels like his personal ego is on the line in any way. And now I will say this. Now Trump has stated, of course, for the record, that his official narrative is that he noticed some recent high profile events, plus he noticed the tents and the homelessness and stuff like that. And so that kind of triggered him into carrying out this action. Now, I've heard, of course, my friends will say like, no, that's not the reason he's doing it. That's his excuse for doing it. But his reason for doing it is partisanly to target blue cities, right? He's already targeted LA. Now he's targeting DC. Next is New York City and Chicago, and et cetera, et cetera. Oh no, he'll never touch a city like Memphis or Miami because they're in red states and they kind of voted a little bit more in his favor. Now, uh, insofar as it goes, I think these are possibly valid. We don't know yet. I think it's very early to make that kind of a statement. I think if he goes and targets 4 more cities and all of them happen to be, only blue, then maybe we're on that path. Now, my question to you is, what do you think about that? Do you think
Now,
that this
all
is
right,
just a political targeting situation?
right. I think the LA and the DC things are different.
Hmm.
LA was just about enforcement of customs and border enforcement, and
Right.
it was sort of it was a little bit of a game of chicken, right?
Yeah.
That they were right, and that he wasn't going to back down, and they were gonna the Democratic leaders were gonna openly
Right. Fight him. Yeah.
encourage people to riot and everything like that to try to get them to back down and see if this was such a he didn't back down and what he got what he wanted and he left, right? There's not a big crisis. He's not ruling DC, he's not ruling LA. DC though, he has a lot more authority. It
Yeah.
is where he lives. It's a lot more personal to him. It isn't just about customs and enforcement. It's basic what he feels like how a city should be run, and he says, "Oh, I've got the authority to sort of do this," and a threat that if they don't listen to me and sort of take me seriously, if they just blow me off as a somebody that they don't like,
Right.
I can revoke their home rule. It is
Sure.
revocable. Now
Sure.
that would be the Republicans in Congress would probably support it. In the House, the Senate, you get a filibuster. We'll see if it could happen. But I think that's a worst case scenario right now. It doesn't look, while everybody's complaining uh, that are political, right? The elites are complaining. And this is all the thing. When elites complain, I get suspicious,
Yeah.
right? Hakeem
Right.
Jeffrey, no, no, no,
Fair
no, no,
enough.
no, no. They're using the most hyperbolic language. But people, the
Of
common
course.
man, you can walk around DC. He hasn't locked down the street. He hasn't imposed martial law.
Right.
Right? He wants people to be more free. This stuff has made them less free. By enforcing the law, the people of DC will have more freedom.
Yeah.
They'll be more
Now,
free to walk. And so this is the paradox of enforcing the law and giving greater the expectation that you can walk in and not be mugged or a victim of violent crime as some sort of shared cultural
that's
experience. I mean,
that's just crazy talk. That's crazy. Well, so yeah. So one thing that I wanted to address too is that one of the common rejoinders from the left now to this action is, oh well, DC is having a 30-year low in crime. Now I want to make sure that everybody understands the way that stats are spun in the media. That's not
yeah,
accurate. DC is not at a 30-year low in crime. They're at a 30-year low for violent crime, right? And so the kind of crimes that Trump is addressing, like the homelessness and like vagrancy and like loitering and like all these other things, the things that just a random presence of extra police will actually address, those aren't really violent crimes. Now, that being said, it can also deter violent crime because any kind of opportunistic crime is likely to be deterred by just extra police presence. The studies all show this. But I just want to make sure that people understand that it's not like DC is this haven from crime now. They're not.
yeah.
Okay. They just
But
be,
but
and just because
right.
they're at their current 30-year low for violent crime, it's still considerably higher than most other places on earth.
Yeah.
Just people understand. Like, I don't want people to think that it's like DC is like Cary, North Carolina, where I live now. Like, I moved from Durham to Cary, thank God. But it's like, I don't even have to lock my door here. It's gorgeous, right? Like, everything is nice here in Cary. I go 20 minutes away to Durham and we're back in like DC type territory, right? Like, it's not very nice.
But
But I
but
just want
but
to,
Durham has improved a lot. So has DC. Their crime
yeah,
system have gone down as a but the hidden person in here, the hidden right association causation, right?
yeah,
What's the lurking variable? The lurking variable has been both in Durham and in DC is gentrification.
yep,
His traffic is so bad living outside of DC that finally people, law-abiding citizens, who said, "Screw it! I'm just going to move to a bad neighborhood in DC and hope it improves, so that I don't have to spend an hour and a half in traffic every day." Right?
right,
And so
right, right,
DC's had this wealthy people moving back into the city and new neighborhoods turning around as a result, right? Of
Right.
owners coming back and
Right.
retrofitting, and there I can find 100 blogs, 100 articles about everyone decrying this and being like, no, DC's gentrifying. That
Oh, yeah.
gentrification, those people coming in are not committing crimes now,
Right.
but there are certain neighborhoods that have not yet gentrified, right?
Of course.
Like in Durham, parts
Yeah.
of East Durham that have not gentrified, that right have an expectation that they're going to be laxly policed, right? And so, stuff goes on there. DC, right, as a pro rata, still has these high rates, and when normal common people, somebody just doesn't want to be carjacked, tries to protect their spouse or their significant other from carjacking,
Right.
and they're like, right, this is a general. I've never had to go through that. I am a victim. My father was a victim of violent crime, was murdered, and so it is something I would hope that nobody has to go through, and having an expectation. This is part of the thing when Trump's right. Why the border has been so good is people stopped coming here. And partly was his just belligerence, his being open about it. I mean, he's deploying stuff, but he hasn't built a whole lot new wall. He's put some stuff down there, but the stories got out and people said, okay, we're not going to be welcome there. And that helped things a lot. So just sending out the message like, hey, stuff that wasn't enforced before that you thought you could get away with, we're gonna try to stop in DC. I think just getting that message out there is going to be an important step.
So I want to address something Silent Magos is talking about. Yeah, absolutely right, Silent. It's all about trust, right? Just because you want to enhance presence, police presence, and just because you want to start enforcing laws doesn't mean that you start treating the local community like they're the enemy, right? It's not an us versus them thing. And I definitely want to address that trust cycle here because that's super important. One of the biggest problems we have in America right now is there's a considerable part of the media that is trying to sow distrust between the law enforcement agencies and the communities, right? Like that's where all the defund the police action comes from. That's where
absolutely.
all this stuff because they want to, and that whenever they show you like a police brutality scene online, and sometimes obviously sometimes these are horrific scenes and situations where those cops need to be locked away forever. But that is the vast minority of circumstances, and they put it to the forefront like it's a vast majority, like it happens all the time. And just walking out, there are literally friends of mine, who are terrified of cops. And I mean, I'm terrified of cops, but I'm terrified that they're going to write me a ticket because that's what they, do to me. They pull me over for every 5 seconds and write me a ticket for running a stop sign or something. But anyway, that's a tangential thing. But it's very important that the trust remains very, very strong between the law enforcement wing and the community. And I want to say this, though. It starts with respecting the position. You don't have to like the cop, the individual person. You don't have to like that person. You don't have to like the way that they talk or the way that they act. But the position of police officer, the position of National Guard MP, the position of FBI or ICE is an authoritative position and holds its own level of respect, whether you want to or not, right? And so it's very important for this trust cycle to preemptively give respect and deference to that position. And if you do that, you're going to get respect back far more often than if you don't. That's why Trump is always so quick to be belligerent, is because people disrespect him all the time, right? If you disrespect Trump, of course you're going to get him saying, look, I'm the top dog. It was the same for me as a manager. When I was a manager, I didn't walk around saying, I'm your boss, do this. But if I ask somebody, like, hey, will you do me a huge favor? Will you take the trash out? And they're like, that I got this one once. Excuse me, Letitia, will you go grab that trash for me? She's like, taking the trash out's a man's job. I'm like, well, it's your job now, and you're going to do it for the rest of the week, right? That's when you start challenging authority is when you start meeting with that belligerence, and not because they're trying to be belligerent, but because they have to show you that there's a hierarchy and an organization. It doesn't make them stronger or better or more human than you or anything like that, but they are in a position of authority for a reason, right? And we've
Yeah.
all voted to place them in that organizational structure. So that circle of trust is huge.
Well, yeah.
And likewise, cops should go out of their way to try to generate that trust with the people that they police. They shouldn't be like trying
Yeah.
to be nasty and snotty and snob, because I've
Yeah.
met plenty of cops that do that. They're like they come up to you and like the moment you open the window, they're like, I got an attitude. I'm like, come, I know you might have had a bad day,
Well,
but I'm still just a
let
taxpayer.
me point out that
Yeah.
policing reform and jail reform was a Republican issue back in the George Bush administration, the George W. Bush administration,
Right.
and continued on during the Obama administration. But what you started encountering at the end of Obama administration and when Trump took over is that Democrats saw that as a sort of winning issue that people sort of liked,
Uh-huh.
and they wanted to take over that, and by taking it, jump to the next level with really liberal prosecutions. Right, you have these prosecutors. We're just gonna right. California passed an initiative where if you stole stuff under $1,000, it was a misdemeanor, and you just paid a fine, and there was no cash bail, and things that in theory work if we lived in a utopia society, but it doesn't account for that people are going to game the system, that there are evil people out there. If somebody, one-time offender, or somebody does it once, you don't come down, you don't try to ruin their life for that. I understand that, but the liberal policy sort of went too far and created this climate where the people didn't feel like there were going to be consequences for breaking laws.
Right.
That's a bad mindset. And so there's been an overcorrection, maybe, or correction now, but Trump especially, right, resisted that. And the Republicans turned and said, no, we need to support police. We need to do this stuff. And the left went even farther. We need to defund police. We need to, right? And so, right, it's this polarization in America. Whatever Trump comes out in favor of, people are going to do the opposite. I think DC got caught up in that too, right? This is a thing I want to talk about too.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of crime in DC that's perpetuated by minors.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I've known lots of people say, I used to raise hell when I was a teenager. For as I turned 18, and I could be thrown in real prison. He had some sort of colorful terms for that. A prison with a cellmate by the name of Bubba.
Yeah. Anyway,
all of a sudden he went straight. Right? He was like, I cleaned up my act right there. And so teenagers, right? And we expect that the young are going to do this, but when they're the ones who are committing a lot of violent crime, because they're not going to be thrown in Bubba prison. They're a lot of times they're just given a slap on the wrist and thrown out. So Trump wants to set an expectation of that changing as well. How do you feel about that? And is that something is that too much micromanaging from the president to get down to that level?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like he's not supposed to be the legislative body of the local district. Now, that being said, that's part of this is like the whole district is such a weird situation in the first place. Like the way it was constitutionally founded is like, it was never really meant to be a city state like it is. It was generated to be like no more than 10 miles squared and blah, blah, blah. It was supposed to be quite obviously limited in scope. So it's odd that Washington, D.C. has grown to be such a like monster politically. Like it shouldn't really be a city state. It should kind of just be, this is the zone where government operates, and then everybody else lives outside of that. Like that's what I thought. But maybe I'm misinterpreting the Constitution. I don't presume to know exactly what the goal was, but that's part of it. But but now that it's like become a city state, Trump, I don't know why Trump needs to and there's obviously so many degrees of there's already a way that judges can try people as adults under the right circumstances if they choose, right? So I really feel like there's still some level of jurisprudence that we need to leave in the court's hands, right? Instead of like, micromanaging everything.
But the prosecutors, right, the district attorneys, that is a political position. It's an elected office, right? The ones that choose what so they have discretion. And when
For the
they're
most
just
part,
yeah, sorry, go on.
so no, just for the most part, and again, this is like the principle is limited government in my mind, right? And so
Yeah.
I kind of have this minor aversion to every time Trump uses his weight to throw around, right? Like it's funny because we're talking about this right now where he's got National Guard going in, and people are talking about is this a violation of posse comitatus? And for those of you who don't know what posse comitatus means, it means power of the country, right? So the whole point of this is, does Trump really have to use the power of the nation to beat a 15-year-old down just because he made a life mistake? I don't know that that's necessary. Is it sometimes? Maybe, right? But I don't think that Trump needs to personally get involved in that sort of thing. I think that, I mean, him, at least he's designated Pam Bondi as kind of like an intermediary. He's not doing it himself, thank God,
Yeah.
and at least there's like they're cooperating with the town, and the town might work on that. But if the town wants to change the law, I'd be fine with that, right? If for them, if they've decided that's what's going on and that's what needs to happen, I trust their judgment. That's what it's supposed to be, is local, state, and then federal government starts manipulating the laws. But it should stay at the local and the state and the city level if it can, as per the 10th Amendment, right? Like that's my big thing. And I want to hold to that principle just because,
I just had a very cynical thought. Tell me what
sure.
you think of this.
Yeah, all right, fire away.
Trump likes to get credit, right?
Yeah. Yeah, he does.
So, I mean, by doing this, doing a crackdown, for 30 days, then
Sure.
turning it back over, and then DC continues to gentrify. Maybe they're doing plans like the bad neighborhoods down by the baseball field, that Navy Yard's down by where the Nationals play. It used to be a terrible area. It's gentrifying. There's a few crime areas down there. Once those get developed and are nice again, crime rates are going to plummet. But everything after this month, he can claim credit for, right? If in 5 years the rates are 5%, 10%, half of what they are now, he can say, well, it's because of my intervention. So it might be he's doing this to get credit.
It could be, and that's actually probably more likely than anything else I've heard as a alternative to the primary narrative, which is just to crack down on crime. Like, yeah, I could see Trump stroking his own ego. I think that's more likely than, say, like partisan targeting. Although he may also be doing that. Like it could be a combination of things. It may be 5 or 6 things at once, starting with I want credit to I want to fix crime to, I noticed these things to, like it could be a million different things.
I saved DC. Our capital was a hellhole. And now these cherry blossoms are so beautiful. Everything's because next year is going to be the 250-year anniversary, right?
Right.
And I'd love to go up there for the 4th of July, maybe get an Airbnb. I would love it. There's sort of an expectation, though, that it's a little rough for me to bring my family.
Yeah.
Right? Like you rent a house in Anacostia. Right. But if the expectation was that it's law and order, we can walk around at night, watch the fireworks, and we'll be perfectly safe. That would be great. We'd love to just have that expectation. And obviously cities, you have to be careful in cities, but it shouldn't be like they felt like it had gone in the past where if you're out late at night, you would expect to be a victim of crime rather than that being the exception.
And I've heard mixed accounts of that too. I've heard people that like live in DC and they're like, it's fine, it's not that big of a deal. But the other thing too is when you live there, like I lived in East Durham, I lived in East Durham, and I didn't fear walking around in my own community at night. But that's because I grew up there and I was used to it. Right? There's a difference, right? Like if I were to take
downtown's a lot nicer now. Like Alston Avenue. Come on, Alston and Maine at like 11 o'clock at night. Come on.
Yeah. If I were to take a someone who doesn't know Durham and walk up Turnkey, they'd be like, let's get the heck, like they're not gonna be comfortable like that. Let's just say that. Now, so one of the other things that's going on here too with regard to this is, of course, every time this is mentioned about him mobilizing the National Guard, the next thing I hear from the left is, well, why didn't the mobilization take place on January 6th? And of course, it's like, I hate to say this, guys, but if you're on here and you're watching, you're from the left, like take this with a grain of salt. But I feel like this is just played out, right? I feel like you have used January 6th as a cudgel for so long, and it's just gotten out of control that like
Nancy
every single
Pelosi turned it down. He offered
right,
to call it National Guard.
right. We often. I mean, there's even videos now that are circulating just to prove because there's people online that are like denying this that Nancy Pelosi took any accountability and like here's the video of her saying, "Oh my God, why did they turn it down? I accept responsibility for. They should have realized that they can't know what it's gonna turn out to be." And the sergeant, even on the day when they're like, "All right, we need to get this mobilization going," it still took like hours to take place, and people are blaming Trump for that like he was personally responsible. And I'm like, first of all, he's not part of that loop. It's the sergeant at arms and like the police commissioner and like a few other guys that are responsible. Second of all, why it takes time to mobilize forces. It takes time to gear them up, to make sure that they're in uniform, to make sure that they're called in, like to make sure that they get from. Have you ever seen DC traffic? Holy crap. Like it is not like the easiest thing in the world to manage, even if you know what you're doing there. And it's like somehow Trump is responsible for them not to get mobile. It took like 5 hours or 6 hours, which I'm like, that was pretty fast. I thought that was pretty good. Like after they got authorization, which took like an hour and a half. I just don't understand why people are bringing this up again for this incident. It just doesn't make sense to me. Someone,
Yeah,
if you're
I agree.
in the
I
comments
agree.
and you're on the left and this is like one of the things that you're saying, like why didn't January 6th have National Guard? Please tell me why this is even being brought up because I just don't understand
Yeah.
the congruency here, the similarity.
No, like for those who are new to the channel, one of the things we always like to see is the policy. It's argued by elites, it's enacted by elites, but what
Yep.
is the effect on the common man?
Right.
Is the common man in DC going to benefit from this? Is it going to be something they don't notice? Is it going to be something that makes their life worse? Right.
Right.
First comment is somebody who's like, it appears to make him feel more comfortable walking around the public parks there. He's willing to give it a shot. Now, obviously, if you're a common person who likes to commit petty crime, then you're going to have a worse time of it, right? But generally, law-abiding, the common man, right? Elites are against this because they don't want to give control to a different political entity. They have power. They want that power. I understand that. But common men, they want the power on. They want the water on. They want to be, not have their property stolen
Right.
or be maimed as they go about just normal everyday things. I think that expectation is a normal. So I'm siding with the common man and thinking this I think will be less disruptive to the common man and more beneficial in the long run. But let's see how it plays out. I don't think there'll be a huge backlash because I don't think what his expectations are unachievable. I think DC can achieve them.
Sure, absolutely. Well, and like, one thing that I do want to just mention, right, is like we can talk about how we think this is going to affect the common man and the local community all we want, but there are statistics behind this kind of action, right?
Yeah.
Now, and one of the big things to understand is the devil's always in the details, right? It depends on the implementation, right? If it's executed well, then additional police presence is almost always contributing to less crime, especially the kind of crimes of opportunity. Like we used to live by this rule in the convenience store world, like in the retail world. They used to call it the 80-10-10 rule, right? And it goes like this: 10% of the world is like just never going to steal from you. They were just raised too well. Their morals are too strong. Their compass is too good. They're just never going to do that kind of dishonest stuff. 10% of the world is like always going to do it. And then the other 80% is shades of gray, and they're going to do it more or less based on how many opportunities you present, based on how high the risk of them getting caught is, based on how easy the take is, based on how much they can get, based on a lot of those things, right? So it is your job as a manager to not hire that bad 10% if you can, right? Only hire the good 10% if you can, but ultimately you're going to have that 80% in the middle that you have to manage well, that you have to make your store a hardened target against that sort of thing. And what Trump is doing here, whether I agree with the manner in which he's doing it, is he's hardening the target. He's making DC into a place where it will be very difficult for crimes of opportunity to occur. Now, like I said, again, I'm against this principally, but that being said, I don't deny that this may have a very, very positive outcome if it's implemented well. And I could say that for a great many things. There's great many things that I wouldn't do myself because it's not principally what I'm for, but it might do very, very well. And the stats seem to bear that out. The stats, like for example, the the way like Kansas City preventative patrol experiment, the Philadelphia patrol experiment, they do these experiments all the time, and especially like foot patrols have a dramatic effect on reducing crime.
Yeah.
Over and over and over again. Now,
Stop
can
and
they
frisk.
screw
You
it
want
up?
to talk about stop and frisk?
Yeah. Now, so yeah, let's talk about that really quick. So, because there are ways to screw it up, right? There are ways to make a what is otherwise a police action that will reduce crime for good and turn it into an overly aggressive thing that while it will still reduce crime, it will raise tensions in the community and like push people to the point where they're just like, all right, this is overbearing, you're being authoritarian, you're being fascist, et cetera, right? There's a way of doing it like with a trust with which we talked about earlier, but there's also a way of doing it where you can mess it up. Now, I think again, stop and frisk is one of those situations where like I feel like it will reduce crime dramatically, but you're going to push people too far, I think. This is just my thoughts. Now, it's one of those things where it's like proven to be technically effective, but the soft cost of it is too high. That's just my personal take because it's one of those things where you're gonna make marginalized communities feel even more marginalized than they already are. You're gonna make people feel like they are being profiled, whether they are or not, and whether and we could talk about profiling. Profiling is not
Oh, yeah.
always a bad thing, but there you can make it into a bad thing. You can make it into a thing where like, oh gosh, every time I see a Mexican, I'm gonna like that cops do screw that kind of thing up. And
Yeah.
there's ways of doing it well, there's ways of doing it poorly. So you have to be, especially with something like stop and frisk, you have to be very careful, like very careful. And you have
For
to have
those of
like
you
set rules.
unfamiliar, right? Stop and frisk was a policing activity brought on by in New York City. Bratton, it was Giuliani's getting all this credit for the gentrification and the low crime rates of New York, and he did Manhattan, but it was Bloomberg who followed after who did stop and frisk.
Right.
Right? He was an independent, and he's the one that made Queens and Brooklyn safe. Right? Brooklyn is now all of a sudden gentrifying like so fast because that. Now stop and frisk, in general, I will say I've never lived in a stop and frisk community, so I've never been stop and frisk. But I think it's an extreme policing activity, and it's only in response to extreme crime things that it should be done. If it's done, you should be reporting why you're doing it, justify why you're doing it for a short period of time, right?
Right.
And it went away, right? It is subject to politicians. People didn't like it, and they voted in new people and got rid of it. So
Yeah.
there is, it's not something like that, but it does infringe upon people's rights that want to commit petty crime, kind of thing. And it was just a result that at that point it was changing this mentality that you could walk around and not get busted.
Right.
And so it was part of changing that. And so it helps set the expectation. We're going to put resources into investigating your crimes because
Right.
we're going to put resources into preventing your crimes.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
And
The
sometimes
prevention just sets the expectation. And so then crime rates go down and then people are fine
right.
living, right? We say people are racist, like people will live with people of any race as long as the expectation is that they'll be safe living there. And
Right.
then
Absolutely.
you get white people moving into parts of Brooklyn that never had a single white person, right? I have a good friend who's from Jamaica, and they said you'd ride the train from Manhattan and you could stand by a white person, you knew they'd get up and leave by this certain stop, and you could sit in their chair, right?
That's funny.
Because now you don't know that person could ride that train all the way to the end of the line, right? And it
Right.
was
Right.
like, what,
I mean,
we're
and that's a good
flushing.
thing.
What are you doing here? Kind of thing. And
That's a good
so,
thing.
so people felt safe, and feeling safe in the community is I think a basic responsibility of government. I'd like DC to do a better job of it. Trump would like to see DC do a better job of it.
Yeah.
Hopefully, he doesn't. This is something if any community is failing, especially if they're a large one, and they're not cooperating with the federal government on in their sanctuary city, be prepared to be criticized, and
Right.
we'll
And
see
so,
what
all right.
happens.
So I want to address Shreddy says a balance of freedom and security is best. And the problem with profiling is if you only stop, say, Mexicans, your stats will confirm that they carry more. But that, of course, is because you're yeah, absolutely. I mean, you definitely want to be, if you're going to, now, I want to say this for the record, profiling gets a bad rep. It can be a good thing. Not profiling the way people think, right? Not profiling like, oh, every time I see a black person, I'm gonna no, that's not good profiling. But it is obviously like, for example, statistically best for police to police, for example, the high crime areas, right? It is statistically best for you to go to the places where there's most crime, right? And it, like if a cop, for example, like shows up at a parking lot in Home Depot, for instance, and 6 guys just start running, you don't need to know their race to know something is up, right? Like that's not profiling race, that's just profiling obvious probable cause, right? And that's what profiling is supposed to be good for, but you can also obviously do it in a terrible way. You can make it into a racist thing, you can make it into a thing where you only police, like the lower social strata, the marginalized communities, the people of color, something like that. If you do that, then yeah, you're being a jerk. But and so you probably need to just be moved on from the force because that's not good for anybody. And that damages trust, again, hurts the trust cycle. But you can do it in a good way. You can say, like, you can look at people, and if it's like you see this group of guys wearing gang colors, and having like gang tattoos on their knuckles, it's a safe bet they're in a gang. That doesn't mean that you let that negatively impact your police citizen interaction, but you should have that knowledge present. You should have that knowledge available to you, and be aware of what safety concerns that might lead. So like profiling can be a good thing if you do it correctly. Stereotyping is a thing that humans have developed as a defense mechanism for thousands of years. If you walk into a jungle and you see a large cat with stripes, and you think that the cat is 400 pounds and has claws that are bigger than your head, it might be safe to be afraid, right? There's reasons that we stereotype. That's a defense mechanism. You just don't want to let it negatively impact any human interaction. That's where it gets dangerous.
I
So,
think I do want to interact.
yeah.
Policing is such a trust. We're trusting the government with violence, with enforcement, and the having bad experience with a corrupt officer, an officer that betrays that trust, uses that violence negatively. It should be treated very seriously, right? And it undermines its. I think nothing will get people wanting to leave a community faster than if there are corrupt police officers, right? That are right. That's the Gotham City. They're comparing DC to Gotham City and Trump to Batman. If you saw that, CNN
That's pretty funny.
called Trump Batman, and it's like, stop! I already voted for him. Stop trying to convince me.
Right?
Stop trying to make me like him even more. Just calm down. But corruption is the big thing, and if Trump can investigate and root out any corruption, I think the one part of the George Floyd or the defund police movement, if police unions are able to fire a bad or corrupt cop, that's the thing. Corrupt cops it's so hard to fire them, because the unions and then it gives the rest of them a bad name. Those that are doing a good work, that are honest cops, that are policing, it's such a hard job. I don't want to be busting people. I couldn't do it. So I have a lot of respect for that. But a bad cop, right, is so corrupting and such a bad influence. It is that fine line. They've got to be good. But right now, let's just enforce the laws and see where it takes us. I'm willing to give Trump the benefit of the doubt for now. Right, and that doesn't mean I defend everything he says or every policy that he'll enact, but I think the direction, the intent is correct.
So I want to address another thing that Shreddy says because he's given us some great comments.
Sure.
There's a problem in that some crimes are so much more policed than others. What does more damage, weed possession or financial crime? And yet there aren't police setting their tent up on Wall Street. Well, of course, the obvious answer to that is one is much more obvious as a crime, one is much more difficult to track as a crime, right? So like if there's a lot of carefully crafted laws that make, like for example, by the FCC, that make financial crimes really complicated. They make them really complex there's a lot of gray areas. And of course, the people from Wall Street unfortunately have these giant legal teams, which can like argue those gray areas much better than a random person who's just got weed on them. But that having been said, like it's one thing if I walk down the street and I see a guy with a suit, I could guess that he's guilty of financial crimes, but it wouldn't be very accurate. However, if I walk down the street and I see a guy that's got bloodshot eyes and smells like weed, I could very safely guess that that person is guilty of weed possession, right? So it's one of those things where it's like the obvious, but the other side to this too is, again, the concentration of where crimes are committed. If you're walking down a zone where there's a lot of crime committed, right, then you would obviously happen to encounter more weed possession. But if you are walking down Wall Street, you're not likely to see a high concentration of crimes. So it makes less sense to just police that area logistically.
And let's put aside, weed possession is a misdemeanor, and most places, even North Carolina, like that's a bad analogy. Street drugs, somebody has a lot of street drugs on them, means they're probably not a user, they're probably selling.
Yeah,
and that's an antisocial. That's why that was always, you were allowed to have a small amount of weed possession on you for religious reasons. You're Rastafarian. But if you have a lot, that means they would bust you with intent to distribute, right? Because selling drugs, especially street drugs now that aren't weed, because you can get weed other places, are antisocial, destabilizing to our communities, and so I will have issue with that. Crimes of greed, Wall Street, there are people that police that. We don't see it. There aren't busts about it. But when it's busted, they are regulated. There is a record, and they do pay attention to that. That's one thing DOGE is trying to do. AI is going to get better at. They're going to be able to audit this stuff. You're not going to be able to get away with this stuff anymore.
Yeah, be careful.
They're going to have to find new scams. There are scammers out there, but we're also improving our ability to find those scams.
Yeah, it's not gonna be long before like nobody can cheat on their taxes ever again, and nobody will ever get away with a financial crime ever again because AI is just gonna be like flag, and it's just gonna be nothing you can do. There'll be some false positives, unfortunately, too. But anyway, guys, that's all we had for you today. It was a great show. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. We do this every Wednesday. But real quick though, I don't know if people have time for this. Is 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock better for people? Because we were thinking maybe pushing this back to 9 p.m. Leave us some comments. Let us know.
Eastern time.
Yeah, Eastern time, 9 p.m. Eastern. I know some people like 8. I know some people like 9. We're trying to figure out what the best time for everybody is. So let us know. And once again, if you guys have anything you want to discuss, topic of choice, throw it our way. We'll definitely kick it. Thank you so much for voting, Josh. Appreciate that. Yeah, anybody who wants 9 o'clock, we may push it back to 9. 9's probably a little barely better for me. It doesn't really matter much. I'm free whenever, but yeah, thank you so much. Thanks, Vicky. Thanks, Josh. Thanks, Silent. Thanks so much for being so engaging today and shredding everybody. All right, catch you guys next time on Common Mansplaining.
Keep coming.